Hey, what is up everybody? It's Animac here for AnimeUproar, and in this video, I will be breaking down the death of every single upper demon moon in the Demon Slayer series. This includes those who died in battle and those who died in other ways. The upper demon moons are the most powerful and most important villains in the series after Demon King Muzan himself. So the deaths of these characters had a profound impact on the whole story. That is why I decided to break them all down right here in one place for your convenience. You guys know the drill. If you enjoy our Demon Slayer content, it would help me a lot if you just left a comment and a like. It only takes a second, but it really helps with that YouTube algorithm. And of course, if you're new here or maybe you watch our videos but you just haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. It is a totally free but very important way of directly supporting this channel. Finally, this video will contain Demon Slayer manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. Now, the 12 demon moons, also known as the 12 Kizuki, are a group of 12 demons who are directly under the command of Demon Daddy himself, Muzan Kibutsuji. These 12 are supposed to be the strongest demons in existence aside from Muzan himself. And they were made so strong by the fact that Muzan personally gave them significant amounts of his own blood. That said, the 12 demon moons are made up of two separate groups, the 6 lower demon moons and the 6 upper demon moons. The lower moons have a number corresponding to their rank engraved into one of their eyes, while the upper moons have that number engraved into both of their eyes. With that in mind, in this video, I will be focusing on the upper moons because, let's face it, the lower demon moons are not nearly as strong. And of course, a bunch of them were just killed by Muzan in a matter of seconds because he was disappointed in their abilities. After that, the lower moons were basically abolished. We know of multiple instances in which both Hashira and even non-Hashira demon slayers were able to defeat lower demon moons. But until the fight against Daki and Gyutaro inside the entertainment district, no upper moon had been killed in 113 years. Meanwhile, dozens of Hashira have been slain by upper moons during that same period of time. So clearly, the upper moons are on a completely different level from the lower moons, and the gap in their strength is just massive. Now, since I mentioned Daki and Gyutaro, let's talk about how they became the first upper moon to be defeated by demon slayers in over 100 years. Daki is introduced as someone who plays the part of an oiran inside the entertainment district, and we know that she's been alive for over a century. For that entire time, she has been using the position of an oiran in order to gain access to all the privileges that an oiran enjoys, while also being able to use the entertainment district as fertile hunting grounds. Daki has been changing her name and identity in order to hide the fact that she is an immortal demon, but other than that, she has been living within a fairly established comfort zone since first becoming a demon. Once in a while, she has to silence someone who realizes that she's actually been alive for generations, but that doesn't seem to pose a big problem for her. When he comes to visit Daki in person, Muzan notices that she has gotten much stronger because she has been devouring so many humans. We also learn that she has killed 7 Hashira in the past, and Muzan says that he has high hopes for her. The first to engage Daki in battle is Tanjiro. He quickly realizes that Daki's obi has special powers. It allows her to hide herself and other people inside of it, and then move through small cracks in walls. She used this obi to capture, hide, and devour countless human victims, and as a result, she has been getting stronger and stronger for over 100 years. Tanjiro is no match for Daki at first, and he even manages to chip his blade, but by using Hinokami Kagura, he learns to fight back. Now, Tanjiro puts up an impressive showing against Daki, and even seems to get the upper hand for a while, but then his body gives out under all the strain that he was putting it through. This then forces Nezuko to come out of hiding and engage Daki in order to protect Tanjiro, who is on the verge of death at this point. Fueled by the anger she feels for the loss of her family at the hands of demons, Nezuko is able to tap into incredible levels of demonic power. And this allows her to accomplish some incredible things like regenerating lost limbs practically instantly. Using this newfound power and her blood demon art, Nezuko actually wrecks Daki, and it looks like the battle is over. But then Nezuko loses control of her demon side and she goes berserk. Sensing the blood that is pouring from the wounds of nearby humans, she snaps and attempts to devour a human. Thankfully, Tanjiro is able to subdue her and prevent her from doing that, but it takes all of his physical power and all of his lullaby singing skills to pull it off. It's a good thing that Tanjiro prevented Nezuko from devouring that human, because he, Giyu, and Sakonji made a promise that if Nezuko were to ever hurt a human, all three of them would give up their own lives. With Nezuko being restrained by Tanjiro, a furious Daki decides to kill both of them and all the innocent bystanders in the area. But before she can do that, Tengen shows up and relieves her of her head so quickly that no one even notices that he did it. Tengen then states that Daki is too weak to be an upper demon moon, so she must not be the upper moon that he came here to fight. An angry and distraught Daki then begins acting like a petulant child, and she calls out for her older brother, whose name is Gyutaro. A strange emaciated creature then emerges from Daki's back, and this misshapen demon is Daki's older brother. It's clear right away that Gyutaro is much stronger than Daki, and that he is the true Upper Moon 6. Now technically they are both Upper Moon 6, but it is only because of Gyutaro's strength that they reached this rank. Daki's strength does not compare. The demon known as Gyutaro consoles his little sister, and then he turns to face Tengen. Gyutaro claims that he has killed 15 Hashira over the course of his long lifespan, and that is in addition to the 7 that Daki claims to have killed. This is evidence that the Hashira of this generation are clearly more powerful than the Hashira of previous generations. Tengen, who is not even considered to be the strongest Hashira, was able to take Daki out with ease, despite the fact that she apparently killed the 7 Hashira from previous generations. A fierce battle then commences between Tengen and Gyutaro, and as the battle progresses, we learn that Daki and Gyutaro are intrinsically connected and that they depend on each other. Daki becomes stronger once Gyutaro awakens, and Gyutaro has the ability to see through Daki's eyes, which allows him to get a better view of the entire battlefield. Gyutaro also has the ability to control Daki, which again serves as a reminder that Gyutaro is the stronger sibling and the main component of Upper Moon 6. But Gyutaro isn't always controlling Daki, and she does have her own free will. On top of that, we also learned that the only way to defeat Daki and Gyutaro is to relieve both of them of their heads at exactly the same time. Inosuke, Sleep Mode Zenitsu, and Tanjiro soon join the fight against Daki and Gyutaro, and they provide badly needed backup for Tengen. Inosuke and Zenitsu take charge of fighting Daki, while Tengen and Tanjiro assume the task of fighting Gyutaro. And we even get some assists from Tengen's awesome and hot ninja wives. Through the fight, we learn that Daki and Gyutaro suffered greatly in their past, and the way that they deal with this injustice is by inflicting suffering upon others as revenge for how they themselves were treated. They learned the dark and cruel nature of this world back when they were still human children, and so they show no mercy to anyone, just like no one showed any mercy to them. Whenever they cause harm to someone who had an easier life than them, they see it as collecting on the debt that is owed to them by the rest of the world. They want to cause misery to others equal to the unhappiness that they themselves experienced. The multifaceted battle against Upper Moon 6 is one of the best fights in the entire series. Many people thought that this fight was even better than the fights in the Mugen Train movie, a movie whose success was unprecedented, and honestly, I have to agree. I loved Mugen Train, and the main fight against Akaza was a masterpiece. But I think that the Entertainment District arc of the anime actually managed to outdo the movie. At one point in the battle, Tanjiro joins Inosuke and Zenitsu in fighting Daki, and thanks to the team effort, Inosuke actually manages to take her head and run away with it. However, Inosuke is quickly stopped by Gyutaro, who catches up to him and stabs him from behind with his sickle before taking Daki's head back. Inosuke's wound looks really bad at first glance, and it appears that he may have been stabbed through the heart, which would mean that he is practically dead already. At the same time, Tengen's lifeless body is lying on the ground below, and it looks like he too might be dead after succumbing to the poison with which Gyutaro laced his weapons. Then Zenitsu gets crushed by a bunch of rubble, and it soon appears that Tanjiro is the last one of the good guys left standing. Although technically he isn't even standing, he is down on the ground and he can barely see as a result of all the strain that he has put his body through. Gyutaro approaches Tanjiro and mocks him for failing to protect his younger sister, even though that is his duty as her older brother. Gyutaro belittles Tanjiro and all humans for being pathetic and weak, and even breaks 2 of Tanjiro's fingers just for the fun of it, I guess. In this moment, things look extremely bad for the good guys. Gyutaro offers Tanjiro a lifeline by telling him to become a demon. If he does that, then his body would become strong rather than weak and pathetic, and he could actually protect his sister instead of failing miserably. Oh, and if Tanjiro refuses to become a demon, then Gyutaro vows to kill both him and Nezuko. But instead of entertaining Gyutaro's proposal, Tanjiro gives Gyutaro one of his famous headbutts to the face. The headbutt itself won't do much to a demon, but Tanjiro was smart enough to use the headbutt as a distraction in order to also stab Gyutaro with a poisoned kunai at the same time. Gyutaro is temporarily immobilized by the wisteria poison on the kunai, and Tanjiro takes that opportunity to try and take Gyutaro's head. At the same time that this is happening, Zenitsu returns to the fight and he uses Thunderclap and Flash Godspeed to try to take Daki's head off. Despite being weakened by poison, Gyutaro is still too strong for Tanjiro to be able to take him down, and the more time passes, the more Gyutaro recovers from the poison. Thankfully, Tengen comes to the rescue. Even though Gyutaro thought that Tengen had died because his heart had stopped, in reality, Tengen used his ninja training to temporarily stop his heart, which also slowed the circulation of poison through his veins. Tengen then used this opportunity that Tanjiro created to jump into the fight again. Tengen and Tanjiro manage to take Gyutaro's head after Tanjiro unlocks the full potential of his Demon Slayer mark. At the same time, Inosuke helps Zenitsu behead Daki. Even though it appeared as if Inosuke had been stabbed through the heart, because he has the ability to dislodge his bones and move the organs in his body around, he managed to survive, and then he snuck up on Daki at just the right time. As both of their heads lie dying, Daki and Gyutaro start arguing about which one of them is to blame for their defeat. But the kind-hearted Tanjiro reminds them that all they have left is each other. No one else will miss them when they're gone. Everyone will curse them for being demons and doing horrible things to so many people. So now, as they lie dying, they must stop this petty bickering. They don't really mean what they're saying, so they shouldn't go off into the afterlife fighting. Although they resist at first, Tanjiro's words do eventually get through to them. Daki and Gyutaro regain their memories from back when they were human, and they remember the promise that they made to each other. The promise that they will always be together. And so they head off into hell together, with Gyutaro carrying his sister on his back like he had done so many times before when they were kids. Daki and Gyutaro's entire backstory is actually great, but doing a deep dive into backstories is not the topic of this video. The main takeaway is that the two of them were villains in the true sense of the word. They didn't regret becoming demons, they didn't regret the evil things that they had done, and they ended up in hell together because of it. But even so, you can still sympathize with their truly tragic story. They were in fact treated horribly by other people when they were human, and they themselves then treated other people horribly. Their entire life was one giant cycle of suffering, hatred, and revenge, and in the end their story is a double-edged sword of tragedy. On the one side we have the tragedy that the two of them suffered, and on the other side we have the tragedy that they willingly brought upon other innocent people. Next up, let's talk about Upper Moon 5 Gyoko and Upper Moon 4 Hantengu, who both meet their end during the Swordsmith Village arc. When we first see them in that meeting of the Upper Moons that Muzan called after the defeat of Upper Moon 6, Hantengu gives the impression of being a meek, timid, and superstitious old man. Although he certainly looks creepy because he is, after all, a demon, he doesn't look very threatening, especially when compared to the other demon moons. Meanwhile, Gyoko is a demon who kind of looks like a genie and who we see emerging from a vase. Gyoko seems to like using sarcasm with his fellow demon moons, but with Muzan he is just eager to please him. Gyoko keeps talking about how he has important information about the Demon Slayers and how that makes him more useful to Muzan than the others. At the end of the meeting, Hantengu and Gyoko are dispatched by Muzan on a big mission. It turns out that Gyoko managed to find the top secret location of the Swordsmith Village, a critically important Demon Slayer sanctuary, and so the two Demon Moons set out to infiltrate and attack the village. Gyoko makes his appearance inside the village after an unsuspecting villager stumbles upon a vase in the middle of a path. As he reaches for the vase, he is sucked in and devoured, but Gyoko then spits him back up, saying that it tastes terrible because the flesh of mere swordsmiths is not high quality enough for him. Gyoko clearly has bigger fish to fry. At around the same time, Hantengu is seen crawling on the roof of one of the buildings in the middle of the night. Hantengu knows that Muzan is angry, and they have to hurry and prove their usefulness to him right away. And the way that he and Gyoko plan to prove their usefulness is by killing everyone inside the swordsmith village, which would be a major blow for the Demon Slayer core. As Muichiro and Tanjiro are talking while Nezuko sleeps, Hantengu just randomly crawls into the same room that they are in. Hantengu is so good at hiding his presence that the Demon Slayers didn't even realize he was there until they saw him with their own eyes. Muichiro and Tanjiro attempt to engage Hantengu, but strangely, he only seems to be dodging and screaming at them to stop being mean to him. Eventually, Muichiro succeeds in taking off the demon's head, but instead of dying, Hantengu splits into two different demons. The head grows another body, and the original body grows another head. The two new demons look completely different than Hantengu did. They look younger and stronger, and they use completely different names. Genya then shows up and both demons are beheaded, but again, instead of dying, the demons split once more, creating 4 separate demons. Tanjiro warns the others that this demon cannot be defeated in the conventional sense. Hantengu actually wants them to attack him and take off his head because that makes him multiply and get even stronger. After one of the demon's attacks sends Muichiro flying into the distance, he rushes to get back to the battle. But on his way back to Tanjiro and the others, he encounters a demonic fish creature that was clearly created by a powerful demon. This fish demon was getting its power from a vase, which means that it was created by Gyoko. The fish demon thing doesn't pose a challenge to Muichiro, but he does eventually come face to face with Gyoko himself. Gyoko, being the sick individual that he is, proudly parades around the bodies of 5 swordsmiths that he has killed and then arranged into some sort of grotesque art piece. He starts babbling on about the artistic merits of his creation, but Muichiro cuts him off and engages him in battle. Gyoko is able to evade Muichiro's attacks by traveling instantly between the different pots and vases that he had already arranged throughout the entire area. Gyoko is able to launch poison needles at Muichiro, and he then manages to use his blood demon art to capture Muichiro inside a giant pot filled with water. With Muichiro unable to breathe, he cannot use his breathing style effectively, and so it looks like he is about to die. Gyoko leaves Muichiro to die and moves on, but after Gyoko leaves, Muichiro is rescued thanks to a young swordsmith named Kotetsu, who helps Muichiro at great cost to himself. Kotetsu's sacrifice imbues Muichiro with a drive to help others, and this allows him to unlock his Demon Slayer mark. Now stronger than ever before, Muichiro confronts Gyoko. Gyoko uses his blood demon art to throw a bunch of squid and fish and other seafood products at Muichiro, but the Hashira is able to use mist breathing to repel all of those attacks. And yeah, I know that saying he throws a bunch of seafood doesn't sound scary, but they're all super deadly attacks, okay? Gyoko is then forced to reveal his true form, in which he appears to be some sort of half-man, half-eel creature. A ruthless battle ensues, but the newly powered-up Muichiro is full of confidence, and he is just too strong for Gyoko. Using mist-breathing 7th form obscuring clouds, he emerges from the mist and relieves Gyoko of his head. Muichiro's success came from the fact that he was able to use wildly fluctuating speed in his movements to confuse Gyoko. And in the end, the Hashira's superb speed and technique was just too much for the demon. Gyoko cannot believe that he was defeated by a mere human child, but it was precisely that overconfidence that destroyed Gyoko in the end. He could have finished off Muichiro while the Hashira was drowning inside that pot, but he just assumed that Muichiro was done for and he was distracted by other things. This was his downfall. Back in the battle against Hantengu, Tanjiro realizes that there are 4 main demons and each one has a different word in its mouth: joy, anger, sorrow, and pleasure. If these 4 divide any further, they don't become any stronger. In fact, the more they divide, the weaker their individual attacks become. Tanjiro also realizes that if he can damage the tongues of these demons, then they will regenerate more slowly. During the fight, Nezuko uses her blood demon art to set Tanjiro's sword on fire, and the resulting heat along with Nezuko's blood turns Tanjiro's blade red. This is highly significant because bright red Nichiren blades can burn demons on a cellular level, which prevents them from regenerating. The legendary Yoriichi Tsugikuni, the Breath of the Sun user, also had a black blade like Tanjiro, but it could turn bright red during battle. With his burning red blade, Tanjiro uses Hinokami Kagura's Sun Halo Dragon Head Dance to decapitate 3 of the 4 Hantengu demons. At the same time, Genya is able to take the head of the 4th one. But even though the regeneration of the demons has slowed down, they are still not dying. And that's when Tanjiro realizes that there is a 5th demon out there. A 5th body must be destroyed in order for Hantengu to be defeated. Thanks to Tanjiro's sensitive nose, Genya is able to locate the 5th and main body. This body looks like the original Hantengu himself, but it is tiny, about the size of a mouse. Hantengu is using that small size to hide so as to prevent his main body from being attacked. Genya and Tanjiro attempt to kill him, but then a new demon shows up to protect the miniature Hantengu. This 6th demon is actually the other 4 demons coming together to create a new demon. Hantengu gets stronger whenever he is cornered or in fear for his life, and the more pressure he is feeling, the stronger he becomes. The 6th demon, Hatred, is the ultimate embodiment of that strength. The new demon gains a decisive advantage over Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Genya in battle, but that is when the love Hashira Mitsuri comes to the rescue. Mitsuri uses her superhuman flexibility and agility, along with the thin and flexible nature of her unique sword, to counter the demon's overwhelming attacks. She is nearly killed at one point after taking a massive attack head on, but her incredible muscle density allows her to survive the attack. And she is then pulled to safety by Tanjiro, Genya, and Nezuko. Mitsuri gets back into the battle, raises her heart rate, and like Muichiro, she manages to manifest her Demon Slayer mark. Now faster and stronger, Mitsuri is able to buy the others enough time to track down Hantengu's real body. A struggle then ensues as Hantengu increases the size of his original body and manages to fight back, but due to all the energy that his other demons have used up, he is getting weaker and weaker. Now desperate, Hantengu tries to find humans to devour in order to replenish his strength. But after Muichiro tosses him a new katana, Tanjiro manages to take Hantengu's head using Hinokami Kagura Dancing Flash, a form that combines Hinokami Kagura with Zenitsu's Thunderclap and Flash technique. And yet, even then, Hantengu doesn't die. His headless body continues to move in an attempt to reach the humans. Tanjiro then realizes that even that was not the real body. This was another demon clone called Resentment. The real body is a tiny demon who is hiding inside the heart of the Resentment demon. The sun is now rising, and Tanjiro has to make a terribly difficult choice. Should he save Nezuko from the sun, or save the humans from the demon? Ultimately, he decides to go after the demon, and he ends up cutting down both the Resentment demon body and the original tiny demon with his flaming sword as the sun continues to rise. And so, within the span of just a few chapters, 2 Upper Demon Moons are defeated. Oh, and Nezuko survives, so you don't have to worry about her. Now, let's talk about Kaigaku, a demon slayer who betrayed his comrades in order to become a demon. He replaced Daki and Gyutaro as Upper Moon 6, and he has a very personal connection to Zenitsu. In chapter 143, Zenitsu comes face to face with Kaigaku inside the Infinity Castle. Zenitsu was a disciple of the former Thunder Hashira Jigoro Kuwaijima, but he wasn't Jigoro's only disciple. Jigoro's second disciple was Zenitsu's senpai, and this senpai turns out to be none other than Kaigaku. Kaigaku was an orphan who had a very tough childhood, and he was forced to become a thief and steal scraps of food just to survive. Eventually, he was taken in by Jigoro and trained to use thunder breathing just like Zenitsu. Kaigaku was able to master all of the thunder breathing forms except for the very first form, which was the only form that Zenitsu himself was able to master. Overall, Kaigaku seemed to be stronger and more talented than Zenitsu, and he believed himself to be a much better candidate for becoming Jigoro's successor. Kaigaku hated Zenitsu for being weak, cowardly, and too familiar with their master. He also frequently mocked and bullied Zenitsu during their training, and for his part, Zenitsu hated Kaigaku too, but he also respected the impressive strength and swordsmanship ability that Kaigaku demonstrated. When Jigoro declared that he wanted both of his disciples to become his successors together, Kaigaku was infuriated because he believed that he was far superior to Zenitsu. He didn't think that Zenitsu was worthy of being placed anywhere near the same level as him. Because of this, Kaigaku abandoned his master, he abandoned the demon slayers, and he chose to become a demon. The fact that one of his own disciples ended up becoming a demon was so humiliating to Jigoro that he took his own life in order to atone for his disciples' crimes. When he learned about this, Zenitsu was absolutely heartbroken, and he vowed to one day defeat Kaigaku. So once Zenitsu and Kaigaku actually come face to face inside the Infinity Castle, it is a deeply personal and emotional battle. The first major development of this battle is the reveal that Kaigaku, despite becoming a demon, is still able to use thunder breathing. But instead of normal lightning, the lightning that accompanies his attacks in the manga is black lightning, which definitely suits the design of his demon form. As soon as the battle begins, Zenitsu manages to actually cut Kaigaku, and Kaigaku is shocked to learn that Zenitsu is far faster and stronger than he had ever been before. In fact, Zenitsu seems to be moving like an entirely different person now, and this underscores just how much Zenitsu has progressed on his Demon Slayer journey. Kaigaku first became a demon after he encountered Upper Moon 1 Kokushibo. Instead of fighting Kokushibo, Kaigaku knew that he didn't stand a chance, so he just kneeled before the Upper Moon's overwhelming strength and begged Kokushibo on his knees to turn him into a demon. Kokushibo explains that turning someone who can use a breathing technique into a demon requires a great deal of Muzan's blood, and there is a very real risk that his body will simply reject the blood and he will die. But Kaigaku was happy to take the blood, and eventually he did succeed in becoming a demon. After his encounter with Kokushibo, whose power is so overwhelming that he could feel fear in every cell of his body, Kaigaku believes that dealing with Zenitsu will be a piece of cake. Having already devoured a large number of people, Kaigaku is confident that he is strong enough to defeat Zenitsu, and he attacks with the second form of thunder breathing called Rice Spirit. He then quickly transitions into the third form and the fifth form as black lightning engulfs the entire room. Kaigaku is able to infuse his thunder breathing with his blood demon art, and this allows him to launch attacks that both slash the opponent and burn their flesh at the same time. Kaigaku proclaims that now that he's become a demon, he has actually surpassed thunder breathing, and at first it looks like he might be right. He manages to cut Zenitsu multiple times, and he then throws an injured Zenitsu from the Infinity Castle. Although it appears that Zenitsu is about to fall to his death, Zenitsu suddenly uses what looks like a new form of thunder breathing called Honoikazuchi no Kami. At first, Kaigaku thinks that Jigoro secretly taught this technique to Zenitsu only because he liked Zenitsu more, but Zenitsu reveals that no, he invented this new seventh form of thunder breathing because he wanted to be able to fight alongside Kaigaku as his equal. And with this new form, Zenitsu succeeds in beheading Kaigaku, and to be honest, it was a pretty short fight, all things considered. Kaigaku is furious beyond words. As his head begins to disintegrate, he can't believe that he was defeated by someone whom he had looked down upon all this time. How could he lose to someone who was always weaker than him? The only silver lining for Kaigaku is the fact that Zenitsu seems to have given up his own life in order to defeat him. Zenitsu no longer has any strength left, and it appears that he will also fall to his death from the Infinity Castle. Kaigaku tries to convince himself that this means that he didn't lose the fight, because Zenitsu is also going to die. However, that is when Yushiro shows up and saves Zenitsu's life. A dying Kaigaku can only watch in despair as Yushiro expresses pity for him and then takes Zenitsu's motionless body to safety. And even though the fight between Zenitsu and Kaigaku was short, it was extremely meaningful. At the end of the day, Zenitsu and Kaigaku had pretty similar lives. They were both basically orphans who had no one to turn to, and Jigoro became the closest thing that they had to family. But while Kaigaku let his harsh past define him, and while he dedicated his entire life to his own self-preservation no matter the cost, Zenitsu recognized that despite his past hardships, there are people out there like Jigoro who truly loved and accepted him. So even though Zenitsu was scared for most of his life and he just wanted to be safe and lead a normal life, he knew that at the end of the day, there were more important things in this world than just self-preservation. He knew that there were other people out there who were worth risking your life for. But Kaigaku was just arrogant, selfish, and obsessed with his own power and preservation, and so he could never look past his own selfish needs. Even after he found someone who genuinely cared for him like Jigoro, he could never be happy because he always wanted more power and more recognition. This is what led him to betray everyone he knew, this is what led him to become a demon, and this is what ultimately led to his downfall as he continued to underestimate Zenitsu because he just couldn't believe that someone whom he'd consider inferior could possibly defeat him. Next up, let's talk about the death of one of the best villains in Demon Slayer, Upper Moon 3 Akaza, whose final battle takes place inside the Infinity Castle against a tag team effort from Tanjiro and Giyu. In chapter 146 of the manga, Akaza confronts Tanjiro and Giyu as they are making their way through the Infinity Castle, and an absolutely epic showdown ensues. Akaza thinks that his punching attacks will be enough to take down a weakling like Tanjiro, but Tanjiro immediately impresses both Giyu and Akaza with his mastery of Hinokami Kagura. Giyu even acknowledges that Tanjiro's current ability is equal to a Hashira's, which is a huge deal, and it really speaks to how far Tanjiro has come. A smiling Akaza then acknowledges that Kyojuro Rengoku was right when he said that Tanjiro is not weak. Akaza tells Tanjiro that he has earned his respect, and then the battle continues with Giyu entering the fray. At this point, Akaza is just excited to be fighting two respectable opponents, and even remarks that it's been 50 years since he's gotten to fight against another Water Hashira. Akaza notes that Giyu possesses techniques that the other Water Hashira that he fought did not, and this emphasizes the point that the current generation of Hashira is clearly stronger than previous generations. Tanjiro and Giyu engage in some really good teamwork against Akaza, and Giyu even manages to cut off Akaza's arm. But being such a strong demon, Akaza can regenerate entire limbs in an instant, so even an attack of that magnitude has practically no effect on him. And just in general, this is a really great fight, because we get to see two swordsmen using two different breathing styles against a fighter who fights using explosive punches and kicks. It's one of the most dynamic battles in the series, and I can only imagine how incredible it will look once it is finally animated. But this fight isn't all about fighting. This is manga after all, so of course there is some talk no jutsu. At one point, a smiling Akaza says that he is glad that Kyojuro died when he did, because he may not have been able to grow stronger since his worthless values made him want to stay human. These words infuriate Tanjiro, who feels that Akaza is mocking Kyojuro. But Akaza says that no, he respects Tanjiro and Kyojuro because they became strong. He only despises those who are weak, and the law of nature always weeds the weak out. However, Tanjiro has a different take on the law of nature. He believes that the true law of nature dictates that the strong must protect the weak. After all, everyone was weak and helpless as a baby at some point in their lives, and yet they survived because someone was willing to protect them. Everyone starts out weak, but someone is there for them and protects them until they become stronger, and when they do become stronger, then they should help others who are weaker than they are. This is actually a really interesting debate about the law of nature and what it really means to be strong. It reflects two very different worldviews, and it adds a philosophical element to this already excellent battle. And by the way, this philosophy stuff isn't just talk. It also has a serious effect on the fight itself, because Tanjiro's words about helping others start triggering Akaza's memories of his human life, memories that he had forgotten and suppressed. At first, this just makes Akaza annoyed with Tanjiro, and he begins attacking him even more ferociously than before. I mean, this fight honestly has everything. Akaza stopping Tanjiro's blade with his bare hands, Tanjiro doing his trademark headbutt on Akaza, Giyu coming in clutch at a crucial time, and so much more. Giyu then awakens his Demon Slayer mark, which gives him a massive power-up in the battle against Akaza. But even with Giyu's increased speed and strength, Akaza is able to adapt, and the fight keeps dragging on, even though Giyu and Tanjiro don't have any time or energy to spare if they intend to move on to defeat Muzan. In his desperation to find a way to defeat Akaza, Tanjiro thinks back to an important lesson that his father taught him. And once he does this, he finally unlocks the ability to see into the transparent world. This allows Tanjiro to have better control of his own movements, and also to predict the moves of his opponent in order to avoid his attacks. At this point, Tanjiro undergoes a change. His hair and eyes look different, and Akaza's instinct tells him that he needs to kill Tanjiro right now because he's becoming too dangerous. Thanks to his newfound ability to access the transparent world, time appears like it's passing slowly for Tanjiro, and so he is able to react much more quickly than ever before. This allows Tanjiro to avoid an attack that Akaza thought would for sure kill him. And so, while Akaza thinks that Tanjiro is already dead, Tanjiro is able to eliminate all ill intentions from his mind and sneak up on Akaza. With a clear mind and access to the transparent world, Tanjiro is able to sneak up on Akaza and take his head off using Hinokami Kagura. Akaza is stunned because in his hundreds of years of fighting and practicing martial arts, he has never met an opponent who had no anger or hatred or ill intention or fighting spirit during a fight. Tanjiro seems to have achieved what Akaza calls the Domain of Supremacy, which is nothing less than a selfless state. It means a sort of flow state without any thought, emotion, or preconceived notion. It's basically Ultra Instinct, but in Demon Slayer, and it's also likely heavily inspired by the concept of sunyata in Buddhism, but that's a topic for another video. Akaza is so determined to keep fighting and get even stronger that he tries to put his own head back on. Giyu prevents him from doing that by moving the head away from the body, but even after the head disintegrates, Akaza still doesn't die. Somehow, someway, Akaza's headless body is still alive and fighting, and he manages to kick a shocked Tanjiro into the wall. Akaza seems to be following in Muzan's footsteps and trying to reach the point where he can overcome even losing his head. Muzan, of course, can survive having his head cut off by a Nichirin blade, and Akaza is attempting to evolve his demon form to do exactly that. It looks like Akaza's headless body is about to finish off both Giyu and Tanjiro, but then, suddenly, Akaza begins to remember his life as a human. He sees a woman who calls him Hakuji, and with tears flowing down her face, she pulls him by the hand and says, "That's enough." At first, Akaza doesn't recognize this woman, but then we get his backstory. Born centuries ago in a very feudal society, Hakuji was very poor, and as a small boy he had to steal just to buy medicine for his sick father. He was arrested multiple times, and he was already a repeat offender by the age of 11. Eventually, his father took his own life just so Hakuji wouldn't have to keep stealing for his sake, and so he could go on to live an honorable life. Hakuji was extremely upset that his father, who did nothing wrong, had to die just because he was poor. So, Hakuji constantly rebelled against the feudal and extremely hierarchical society of the time. He learned how to fight very well, and on one occasion he even beat up 7 adults on his own without even using a weapon. He was then discovered by a martial arts trainer who saw potential in him, and so Hakuji joined this man's dojo. The dojo master put Hakuji in charge of taking care of his sick daughter, Koyuki. After 3 years at the dojo, Hakuji became extremely close to his master and Koyuki. Eventually, his master asked Hakuji to become his successor and take over the dojo, and Koyuki even confessed her feelings for him, and the two of them were to be married. In that moment, Hakuji believed that he could actually start over and live an honorable life like his father had always wanted, and he would have given his life to protect his master and Koyuki. But then one day while Hakuji was visiting his father's grave, people from a rival dojo who wanted to take over Hakuji's dojo poisoned the well, and both Koyuki and her father, Hakuji's master, died. Once again, someone Hakuji loved died while he wasn't there, and he was powerless to protect them. In that moment, Hakuji snapped. He attacked the rival dojo and killed 67 of its members with his bare hands. The carnage was so brutal that the incident was reported as a demon attack. Muzan, who knew that there weren't any demons in the area, was so surprised by these reports that he came to see what was going on for himself. Once he found Hakuji, he injected his blood into him by force. Muzan had already been planning the creation of the 12 demon moons at the time, and he thought that Hakuji, aka Akaza, would make a great candidate. After that, Akaza lost his memories and he spent his life trying to get stronger, even though he had forgotten why he was trying to get stronger in the first place. The real reason why he wanted to get stronger was so that he could protect the people he loved. But as a demon who lost his memories, he didn't even realize that all the people he wanted to protect were already dead. And although the demon Akaza succeeds in regenerating his head in the present, and although Giyu and Tanjiro were basically defeated at that point, Akaza decides to listen to Koyuki. As a demon, he spent hundreds of years hating humans because of how weak they are, and he killed many of them. But in reality, the one he had wanted to kill all along was himself, because he had been too weak to protect the people he loved. So instead of continuing the fight, even though he was almost certainly going to win, Akaza turns his attack on himself and then refuses to regenerate. Instead of continuing to live as a demon, Akaza decides to go home to his father, his master, and Koyuki. Akaza, aka Hakuji, is such a fascinating character because despite being a demon, you can make the argument that he was never really evil. He was born into very difficult circumstances and he committed crimes, but he only did it in order to save his sick father's life by getting him the medicine he needed. Then, after his father's tragic death, he He rebelled against the type of society that allows innocent people to perish just because they happen to be poor. But even after falling into a life of crime, he tried to turn his life around. He dedicated himself to martial arts, and he formed a new family with his master in Koyuki. And then the people he loved were taken away from him by scheming murderers. So Hakuji snapped and exacted his revenge on those who murdered his loved ones, and that is how he got Muzan's attention. But unlike other demons who specifically agreed to accept Muzan's blood, Hakuji tried to fight Muzan. However, Muzan turned out to be too strong, and he then forced his blood into Hakuji to see if he would be able to handle it. After that, Hakuji lost his memories and became Akaza, and being a demon and fighting was all he knew. So you really could argue that unlike the other demons who willingly embraced Muzan, Akaza was as much a victim as he was a villain. And in the end, Akaza, or rather Hakuji, did redeem himself. If he chose to keep going, he could have definitely killed both Tanjiro and Giyu. But instead, he chose to stop fighting and he willingly joined his loved ones in the afterlife. This decision made Muzan's defeat possible because both Tanjiro and Giyu would go on to play an important role in Muzan's defeat. Now it's time to talk about Upper Moon 2 Doma, who is definitely not a victim and who has no redeeming qualities. In fact, he is probably the most messed up demon in all of Demon Slayer, and I did an entire video about him recently where I argued exactly that point. Doma's death occurs as a result of a joint effort by the insect Hashira Shinobu Kocho, Inosuke, and Kanao. Shinobu makes the ultimate sacrifice during this battle, but as a result of that sacrifice, she manages to avenge her sister and achieve her ultimate goal. Doma is of course the demon who killed Shinobu's sister Kanae 4 years earlier. Doma fled the scene before he could finish Kanae off and consume her because the sun was already coming up. And once Shinobu encounters Doma inside the Infinity Castle, he brazenly tells her how much he regrets that he didn't have the opportunity to devour her sister. As a furious Shinobu attacks Doma, the monumental battle against Upper Moon 2 begins. At first, Doma isn't worried at all. He thinks that Shinobu is just too weak to defeat him because she's physically incapable of severing his head. Since a demon can't be killed by just jabbing and stabbing them, Doma will just keep regenerating whenever Shinobu does any damage to him. But Shinobu does have one potential advantage. She laced her sword with powerful wisteria poison, which has long been used to immobilize and defeat demons. But despite stabbing Doma multiple times using the poison-laced weapon, the Upper Moon seems unbothered because his power as the second most powerful demon moon allows him to rapidly develop a resistance to poisons. Essentially, Doma has multiple major advantages over Shinobu in this battle, and this includes raw physical strength, the ability to regenerate, strong resistance to poison, and so on. That said, Shinobu does have remarkable speed, and this enables her to get around Doma's defenses and pierce and stab him repeatedly. And yet, even though she is able to hurt Doma with her attacks, Shinobu just can't do any lasting damage. She is too short and physically weak to take off his head, and unless she can find a way to do that, she just can't win. Ultimately, Doma manages to seriously injure Shinobu to the point that she can barely breathe. She's lost a lot of blood, one of her lungs is punctured, and it looks really bad for her. But Shinobu still forces herself to stand up even though every single breath she takes is painful. Doma is shocked that Shinobu is still standing and he even offers to kill her quickly to end her suffering. But Shinobu refuses to give up, even in such an impossibly difficult situation. She attacks Doma again using her incredible speed. She is so fast that even Doma, the third strongest demon in the world, cannot anticipate her next move. She goes in down low and manages to pierce Doma right through the neck with her poison-laced sword. Even though she isn't strong enough to take Doma's head with a single thrust, Shinobu hopes that poisoning him in such a vital spot will be enough to kill him. Sadly, Doma still appears unaffected by the poison. Poison just doesn't seem to have a real effect on him, and it's as if all of Shinobu's superhuman efforts have been in vain. Doma then grabs Shinobu as if he's hugging her. With tears flowing down his face, he tells Shinobu how admirable it is for her to keep fighting so bravely despite the fact that her situation is hopeless. She is so weak and she's trying so hard, and Doma thinks that this is adorable. Doma then adds that because Shinobu's determination has impressed him so much, he now considers her worthy of being eaten by him so the two of them can be together forever. When Doma asks if she has any last words, Shinobu tells him to go to hell. Then, as a helpless Kanao watches in disbelief, Doma begins absorbing Shinobu into his own demon body. Kanao tries to attack Doma and save Shinobu using her flower breathing, but Doma is too fast. He even smiles and begins to gloat about how fine feasts seem to be coming to him one after the other. He is clearly planning to devour Kanao as well, since Doma's victims of choice are women with strong bodies. Despite putting up a good fight, and despite her incredible speed and special eye powers, Kanao just can't defeat a demon as strong as Doma. Just as Doma manages to take her sword and it looks like he's about to kill her, Inosuke shows up and saves her. An intense battle then ensues between Kanao and Inosuke on the one side and Doma on the other. But then, in a surprising turn of events, Shinobu actually returns to the story despite already being killed and devoured by Doma. It turns out that Shinobu knew ahead of time that in order to defeat her sister's killer, the notorious Upper Moon 2 Doma, she would have to give up her own life. That was her plan from the start. She knew that Doma was a glutton who loved devouring women in particular, and she also knew that he wouldn't be able to resist devouring a female Hashira with a strong body. So, Shinobu started ingesting wisteria flower poison little by little for over a year so that she would build a resistance to it. The goal was for her to have a ton of that poison circulating throughout her body when Doma decided to devour her. With her sword alone, Shinobu was able to deliver only a small amount of poison into Doma's body. But if he consumes her entire body, he will automatically consume 70 times the lethal amount of wisteria poison. The author of Demon Slayer later stated in the extra pages to volume 19 that she actually intended for the number to be 700 times the lethal amount, but she mistakenly wrote 70. That said, the official translation for this part of the manga at viz.com still says 70 and not 700. As Doma is facing off against Kanao and Inosuke, all that poison that he ingested without even realizing it finally begins to take effect. His body breaks down completely, his very bones begin to melt, and even with his demonic regeneration, he cannot undo the effects of such an immense amount of poison. Doma desperately tries to keep fighting, but Kanao and Inosuke work together to cut off his head, and with that, Upper Moon 2 Doma is finally destroyed. As he is dying, Doma meets Shinobu once again, somewhere between this life and the next. Shinobu sees firsthand that she succeeded in her mission, and now Doma must accept his death at her hands. And yet, Doma is not sad, angry, or scared about what happened. In fact, he tells Shinobu that he finally understands what love is because he knows that he loves her. The very act of killing him impressed Doma so much that he has now fallen in love with Shinobu, even though he has never felt like this about anyone ever before. Doma asks Shinobu if she would accompany him to hell in the tone of a man who is asking his crush out on a date, and Shinobu smiles and says, "After you, you worthless bastard." Doma really was a special kind of crazy, and even though I have a lot to say about him, there's no need to get into that here because I have an entire video that analyzes Doma as a character. I will link that video down in the description if you guys want to check it out. But now, it's time to talk about the death of the strongest demon moon, Upper Moon 1, Kokushibo. His final battle takes place inside the Infinity Castle and he fights against Muichiro, Sanemi, Gyomei, and Genya at the same time. That is 3 Hashira and another demon slayer with special demonic powers against a single demon. Muichiro is the first to encounter Kokushibo, and he senses right away that Kokushibo must have been a demon slayer back when he was human. Kokushibo has an overwhelming and majestic presence, and it is clear that he is a master swordsman. In fact, the strongest demon moon has such an intimidating aura that Muichiro begins to shake and his body doesn't even want to fight, which is something that has never happened to him before. This speaks to just how overpowered Kokushibo really is. Even his mere presence makes even the bravest and most powerful warriors shake in terror. As Muichiro tries to get a hold of himself, Kokushibo calmly asks for his name. Muichiro identifies himself and Kokushibo responds that his own human name was Michikatsu Tsugikuni. Although the Tsugikuni name must have died out over time, Kokushibo can tell that Muichiro is a descendant of his own child. This means that Kokushibo is a direct ancestor of Muichiro. This comes as news to Muichiro, but regardless, he musters the courage to steel his nerves and prepare for combat. Kokushibo commends Muichiro's spiritual strength and ability to calm his nerves so quickly. Muichiro then initiates the first attack on Kokushibo using mist breathing. Even though the Hashira isn't able to land a single blow, the Upper Moon is still impressed by Muichiro's strength and courage, especially since he can tell that Muichiro is only 14. Kokushibo also notices that the Demon Slayer mark has now appeared on Muichiro's face, and as Muichiro continues to use impeccable technique in an attempt to hit Kokushibo, the Upper Moon decides that it would be poor etiquette if he didn't draw his own sword. And so Kokushibo reveals his demonic breathing style, moon breathing. Unfortunately for Muichiro, literally the first swing of Kokushibo's moon breathing slices off his left hand. Muichiro quickly makes a tourniquet from his shirt and he keeps on fighting, practically unfazed by the sudden loss of his hand. Kokushibo is so impressed by the resilience of his descendant that he decides that killing him would be a shame. Instead, Kokushibo will ask Muzan to turn Muichiro into a demon. Muichiro is then literally pinned down to a pillar with a sword, so he can't really do anything to Kokushibo, but that is when Genya shows up. Genya tries to sneak up on Kokushibo and shoot him from behind, but Kokushibo is already aware of Genya's presence, and using his incomprehensible speed, he manages to cut Genya into pieces. But to Kokushibo's surprise, Genya is still alive due to his own demonic powers, and before he can finish Genya off, Kokushibo is also attacked by Genya's brother, the Wind Hashira, Sanemi. Sanemi vows to make Kokushibo pay for slicing up his little brother, and after Kokushibo draws his own sword, we get to see an absolute fierce battle between wind breathing and moon breathing. Eventually, the stone Hashira Gyome also joins the fight, and everything is ready for the final showdown. And while the fight between moon breathing and stone breathing rages, the unbelievably impressive Muichiro manages to pull the sword that had been pinning him to that pillar out of his own chest with his bare hands. Now, Muichiro knows that he will likely die from blood loss as a result of the injuries that he has already sustained, but he is determined to do something useful before he dies. He does his best to wrap his wounds and stop the bleeding, and then he helps Genya put himself back together. Although both of these guys are badly hurt, they both declare that they will keep fighting until the very end. Genya is able to consume some of Kokushibo's own cells, and then he and Muichiro try to pick themselves up from the ground and rejoin the fight. As that is happening, Gyome and Sanemi are already tag teaming Kokushibo in a desperate attempt to take his head and defeat him. Muichiro finally rejoins the battle when he steps in to save Sanemi from one of Kokushibo's attacks, and then, determined to help while he is still able to move, Muichiro attacks Kokushibo. While Kokushibo is distracted by attacks from Gyome and Sanemi, Muichiro manages to move close enough to pierce Kokushibo's torso with his sword. Muichiro even loses one of his legs in the process, but he doesn't care. Muichiro is prepared for death, and he just wants to be as useful as he possibly can before he dies. Muichiro is not only one of the most talented Hashira in history, but also one of the most brave and selfless, and his performance during this fight is truly amazing. By putting his life on the line, Muichiro is able to keep Kokushibo pinned down in place long enough for Genya to shoot him, and once he is shot by Genya's bullets, the Blood Demon Art activates. This Blood Demon Art creates a tree that wraps all around Kokushibo's body and prevents him from moving. Unfortunately, soon after, Kokushibo sprouts blades all over his body, and these blades are able to slice up the tree and free him. Muichiro, who is still right next to Kokushibo and still piercing him with his sword, decides that he must protect Gyome and Sanemi at all costs so that they can survive and contribute to the fight against Muzan. He is so determined to help defeat Kokushibo before he dies that his Nichiren blade suddenly turns red. And this newly evolved blade causes such pain to Kokushibo that he is unable to move. A dying Genya then reactivates that tree Blood Demon Art one more time, helping to keep Kokushibo immobile long enough for Sanemi and Gyome to decapitate him. At first, it looks like Kokushibo's power is so great that even decapitation cannot defeat him. To everyone's shock, he is able to regenerate even his head, but this second head looks nothing like a human head. It is a monstrous demonic head, and when Kokushibo catches a glimpse of his own face, he is disgusted. Kokushibo is of course the twin brother of Yoriichi Tsugikuni, the legendary Breath of the Sun user. Kokushibo wanted to become the strongest swordsman in the world, but he eventually realized that he would never surpass his incredibly talented twin brother. Yoriichi had godlike talent that simply could not be surpassed, and despite the fact that Kokushibo was an incredibly strong swordsman back when he was human, he was never good enough to compete with his brother. Even though Kokushibo felt compassion for his brother at first, After Yorichi's superhuman talents started to manifest, jealousy consumed Kokushibo because he knew that no matter what he did and no matter how hard he tried, he would never be able to surpass his brother. Kokushibo even abandoned his family in order to dedicate his life to becoming a demon slayer. He trained with Yorichi, he learned the secret of breathing styles, and he even manifested the demon slayer mark. But still, he was nowhere close to matching Yorichi. Kokushibo's breathing style was only an inferior derivative of sun breathing called moon breathing, and since every demon slayer who manifested the mark died by the age of 25, except for Yorichi of course, Kokushibo found himself staring death in the face without having accomplished his goal of becoming the strongest samurai and surpassing his brother. And that is when Muzan approached him. Muzan had been looking for a skilled swordsman who could use breathing techniques so that he could turn him into a demon, and that is what he offered to Kokushibo. If Kokushibo became a demon, he would not die at the age of 25, he would not have to deal with the limitations of a human body, and he would have all of eternity to train until he really became the strongest samurai of all time. Kokushibo took the deal. He became a demon, and he started cutting down all demon slayers in order to clear a path for him and Muzan to live forever. But even 60 years after becoming a demon, Kokushibo still wasn't able to surpass Yorichi. The two brothers came face to face again when Yorichi was already in his 80s. Kokushibo was a demon who didn't age, so he was still at peak strength, but Yorichi was a frail old man. And yet, Yorichi was still stronger than Kokushibo. His technique was so flawless that he still defeated his brother in battle. However, Yorichi died of old age before he had a chance to strike the finishing blow. So, Kokushibo survived the battle, but he was forced to live another 400 years with the knowledge that even as an old man, Yorichi was still stronger than him. Kokushibo abandoned his family, his comrades, and his very humanity to surpass his brother and to avoid defeat. But in the end, he still didn't achieve his dream. Not only did he fail to kill Yorichi, but he also failed to become the strongest samurai. That is because Yorichi became a monster, not a samurai. A samurai doesn't become a demon instead of accepting defeat with honor. A samurai doesn't devour people just to get stronger, and a samurai doesn't have the face of a grotesque monster. Faced with this cruel truth, Kokushibo can't believe that he allowed his fear of defeat to turn him into such an inhuman creature. Due to Kokushibo's severe crisis of conscience, his body begins to break apart in the place that Muichiro had stabbed him with his red blade. Kokushibo is then finished off by Gyomei and Sanemi, and so, finally, after nearly 500 years of life, Upper Moon 1 Kokushibo falls down in defeat. Genya and Muichiro both die from the wounds that they suffered in the battle against Kokushibo, but Sanemi and Gyomei live long enough to contribute to the final battle against Muzan. The final Upper Moon that we need to talk about is Nakime, who briefly serves as a replacement for Upper Moon 4 Hantengu after Hantengu's defeat. She is a biwa-playing demon who controls the Infinity Castle using the strings of her biwa. And she also has the ability to spy on others by releasing multiple eyeballs from her body that can move on their own and keep track of her enemies. I won't spend too much time on Nakime because she is not a fighter, and her death is quite sudden and anticlimactic. Once all the Upper Moons except for Nakime are defeated, the focus of the Demon Slayers turns to fighting Muzan. After Yushiro takes control of Nakime's vision and begins using the Infinity Castle against Muzan, Muzan simply kills Nakime by crushing her head, which prevents Yushiro from continuing to use Nakime's powers against him. And that is it! Every Upper Moon's death in Demon Slayer explained. Be sure to let me know down in the comments who your favorite Upper Moon is, and which of them do you think went out in the most epic fashion. And please don't say Nakime because I'll know you're lying. If you're looking for a video to watch next, check out my video that breaks down every Hashira's backstory, link in the description. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this in the future, just leave a quick like. It only takes a second, but it really helps a lot. And if you want to support the channel directly for free, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. I mean, if you made it all this way in this long video, then I'm sure you would enjoy my other content, so don't forget to subscribe. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys!